In Washington, U.S. President Donald Trump spoke again on gun control in the wake of the deadly shooting in Florida.
Yeah, he said, quote, "We have to take action." He's said that before, but what exactly is the president prepared to do to push? Our Jim Acosta with a closer look.
Thank you very much.
President Trump insists he would have saved the day. If he had been on the scene of the Parkland school shooting, the president says he would have stormed the building.
I really believe I'd run in there even if I didn't have a weapon. And I think most of the people in this room would have done that too.
Unlike the deputies, the president says, who choked.
They weren't exactly Medal of Honor winners. All right? The way they performed was, frankly, disgusting.
When the president said earlier today that he would have run into the school, was he suggesting that he could have saved the day?
I think he was just stating that as a leader, he would have stepped in and hopefully been able to help.
Is he trained in using a handgun or a firearm of some sort?
I don't think that was the point he was making.
In a candid exchange with the nation's governors at the White House, the president revealed he met with leaders from the National Rifle Association over the weekend. It was no surprise when the president defended the gun lobby's intentions.
Don't worry about the NRA. They're on our side. You guys, half of you are so afraid of the NRA. There's nothing to be afraid of. And you know what? If they're not with you, we have to fight them every once in a while. That's okay.
The president also continued to push his goal of ending the days of gun-free zones at schools in order to put more firearms in the hands, he says, of skilled shooters.
I don't want teachers to have guns. I want highly trained people that have a natural talent, like hitting a baseball or hitting a golf ball or putting. How come some people always make the 4-footer and some people under pressure can't even take their club back?
One of the Democratic governors in the room, Jay Inslee from Washington State, took issue with that plan, then offered the president some advice.
I've listened to the first grade teachers that don't want to be pistol packing first grade teachers. So I just suggest we need a little less tweeting here, a little more listening, and let's just take that off the table and move forward.
Mr. Trump did vow to ban so-called bump stocks, the attachments that allow semi-automatic rifles to fire like machine guns. That was the weapon of choice in the Las Vegas massacre last October, though not the Parkland school shooting.
Bump stocks, we're writing that out. I'm writing that out myself. I don't care if Congress does it or not. I'm writing it out myself, okay?
The president need only look at the polls to see the growing support for new gun control laws, now at 70%, a huge jump from the days after the mass shooting in Las Vegas. And the students who have been demanding action on gun control now have the First Lady's seal of approval.
I have been heartened to see children across this country using their voices to speak out and try to create change. They're our future, and they deserve a voice.
Still, the White House appears to be staying on message. Even daughter Ivanka Trump sounded supportive of the idea of arming teachers in an interview with NBC.
I think that having a teacher who is armed, who cares deeply about her students or his students, and who is capable and qualified to bear arms is not a bad idea, but it's an idea that needs to be discussed.
The White House was asked whether the president is backing away from his support for raising the age for people buying assault rifles to 21 nationwide. The president tweeted his support for that last week, but today Press Secretary Sarah Sanders would only say he supports that concept. Michael and Amra.
All right, our thanks to Jim Acosta for that report. Joining us now to discuss the debate and the growing calls for gun control in the U.S. is Jonathan Lowy. He is the vice president of the Legal Action Project at the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence. Thank you for your time, Jonathan. I want to first ask you about this idea of arming teachers because Jim Acosta was just talking about that and the president was as well. Your organization focuses on preventing shootings like the one we saw in Florida. Is arming teachers part of the answer?
No, and that's an idiotic idea. I mean, we give law enforcement a very tough job to take on armed criminals. We give teachers a very tough job to teach our kids. It is far too great a burden to ask teachers to also, pack a deadly weapon and use it in very difficult circumstances. Law enforcement's against it. Teachers are against it. Virtually any sort of intelligent analyst is against that idea.
It's interesting. The president, since the shooting in Florida, has been very strong vocally. We're going to fix it. We're going to make things happen. We're going to do things. And yet it does appear that the only things that are left are bump stocks, which they were going to ban after the Las Vegas massacre. Even the raising the age to 21, that's probably not going to go anywhere. And so what's left? Is this going to be another situation where 2-3 weeks from now, nothing's happened, nobody's talking about it? The only difference in this situation is the kids and their eloquence. And to that point, why don't we do this now? The Florida State Senate subcommittee recently rejected a proposal, today I think it was, rejected a proposal to ban assault weapons. Have a listen to what happened.
So by your vote, the amendment is not adopted.
Wow, I mean, just that reaction there, shame, 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 throw them out, throw them out. Do you feel that this is different, that this is a moment, that there is momentum?
There's no question about it. I mean, a poll came out over the weekend that showed support for gun violence prevention measures to be the highest in 25 years since before the Brady Law was enacted. The intensity of support was, I think, the highest ever. Look, about 97% of Americans, virtually every American, supports universal background checks for all gun sales. About 70% of Americans support banning military-style assault weapons, like the one that was used in the Parkland attack and was used at the Aurora movie theater and at Sandy Hook and many other mass shootings. So it's very simple about what to do. The American people get it. And if President Trump wants to be a leader on this issue, it's very simple. We're not asking him to run into a school facing a shooter. We're asking him to run into Capitol Hill and demand that there be a vote tomorrow on pending legislation to ban assault weapons, to require background checks for all gun sales, to have extreme risk protection order legislation that would enable families to keep guns out of the hands of people at risk. It's very simple. American people are behind it. We just need Congress to get behind the people instead of the gun lobby.
Yeah, but unfortunately, this is a movie we've seen over and over again, and we've talked about this every time after every mass shooting that we've covered. We've said, look, the polls show almost every single American backs expanded background checks, yet Congress will not pass legislation to reflect the will of the people, because as we know, the NRA opposes expanded background checks. I was on your website, the Brady Center, and you guys were citing a statistic that 33,000 people die from gun violence each year in the United States, and the goal of the Brady Center it's a very bold goal to cut down gun deaths in half by 2025. That's not that far away. How are you guys going to achieve that, especially with this political climate that we continue to see, which prevents anything from changing that's significant?
Well, first of all, we've seen virtually every industrialized nation reach that goal and more. So there's no question that it can be done in America. Americans are not more criminal than in other countries. We're not more violent. We just have legislators that aren't acting for the safety of the American people. And again, the polls show overwhelming support and tremendous momentum. And these young people are just going to get older and become voters. And we've seen the intensity at the voting booth as well. We saw it in the Virginia midterm elections, tremendous intensity on the side of people favoring gun violence prevention, the sort that we've never seen before. So the times really are changing on this issue. It may happen this year. If it doesn't, it'll happen next year or soon after, because voters are not going to stand for politicians who are in the gun lobby's pocket.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, because, as Amra said, we've seen this movie before. You've got to hope that there's momentum this time around. When 97% of people want something to happen and the legislators don't do it, that says something.
It does.
And here we are again. Fingers crossed that there is the momentum. Jonathan Lowy, thanks so much with the Brady Center. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So gun control is just one of the challenges facing President Trump. Mexico's president has canceled a trip to the U.S. after a really tense phone call with Mr. Trump.
Yeah, the source of that tension, you guessed it, Mr. Trump's plan to build a wall along the border and his promise that Mexico will pay for it. Patrick Ottman is in Mexico City with the latest. And Patrick, we're learning that the president plans to visit California next month to see border wall prototypes, but this has been a real spat here.
Absolutely. And this call and the proposed visit were really intended to smooth over this rough patch that has been dogging U.S.-Mexican relations for the better part of a year. But during that call, they hit a major pothole, neither side willing to give on the issue of a wall being built on the U.S.-Mexican border, and more importantly, who is going to pay for it. CNN is told that Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto really dug in and essentially asked President Trump to promise that if he did come to the United States, that this would not be an embarrassment for him, that President Trump would not bring up the wall, and that, as they had in previous conversations that have also been leaked, that they would essentially agree to disagree, but keep it out of the public limelight. President Trump did not take to that at all. He insisted that Mexico is paying for the wall. They got upset, and apparently that ended the call and ended the hopes, at least in the short term, of any kind of visit. Here in Mexico, it's not just about the billions of dollars that this wall would cost. It really is a point of honor. People feel that from day one of his campaign, President Trump has said racist and ill-informed things about Mexican immigrants in the United States. So this goes far beyond the cost of the wall. People really feel that it's a point of pride, and that no public official in Mexico is going to come out and say that President Trump's plan is something they should even consider. It's an election year in Mexico. There's going to be a presidential election in July. So very clearly, the Mexican president was trying to take this issue off the table, make sure the election isn't a referendum on Donald Trump. That was not successful. More and more people are talking about this, and Mexicans are very angry that the president was thinking of going to Washington, and that once again, President Donald Trump is saying that he's going to force Mexico to pay for this wall.
And once again, another canceled trip to the United States by the Mexican president. Patrick Ottman, great to see you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patrick. And the U.S. midterm elections later this year, we were discussing this a little bit earlier, could bring some bad news for Mr. Trump.
Yeah, CNN poll, a new one, shows Democrats are surging as 54% of registered voters say they will back a Democrat, while just 38% say they will vote Republican.
Now, that's up from January, when the Democrats held a slight advantage over the Republicans, 49 to 44%. So a big shift statistically. It's about the same as the numbers from 2006, when Democrats were able to win both houses of Congress.
But of course, anything can change between now and November. We'll keep that in mind. Meantime, the U.S. president says he is open to talks with North Korea, but the conditions have to be right. He also says China is doing more to pressure North Korea than ever before.
I think that President Xi is unique. He's helping us with North Korea, who, by the way, wants to talk. As of last night, you heard that. They want to talk. And we want to talk also only under the right conditions.
Well, the U.S. president went on to slam his predecessors, as he's done before, saying that they did nothing about North Korea. South Korea's president says the U.S. should lower the threshold for talks, not just say that the end result has to be denuclearization before they've even begun.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break from here. And first, there were the Chibok schoolgirls, and now Nigeria is facing another mass kidnapping at another boarding school. See how the government's delayed response is raising worries and a lot of anger.
And then a closer look at Xi Jinping's power play and if he could really rule for life.